Holla ballers, welcome to our Monster Hunter World journey where the curtain has been pulled back. 18 days of blind play, 150 hours in the game, and yesterday was the podcast with Rurikhan where all the things that I've been wondering about, things I'd missed, things I didn't know about at all, were all revealed over a 3-hour session which involved many face palms, many like, oh, okay, and then, oh my god, all that's happening. So we'll link to the podcast down below. It was 3 hours. There was a lot of discussion. It was really good to see. Just a personal note, really happy to see that we were like way over 1,000 viewers on the YouTube stream as well as the thousands over on Twitch. That's great to see. That's really cool to see people are interested and using both platforms. That's exciting for us. All right, let's get into it. So there was a lot, right? There's 3 hours. I'll go through the day first, which was Alatreon attempts. I say attempts, Alatreon still lives. And the primary problem I ran into throughout the entire day is I could not for the life of me figure out what the hell is going on with the massive room-wide AoE. I found out last night it's called Eschaton. Apparently, I'm going to double-check this. People were claiming it says that name during the fight. I've never heard it before, so I'm going to double-check that to see if that is the case. I'm pretty sure it just says Alatreon is preparing a powerful attack and doesn't say it's casting Eschaton or anything like that. But it was a word I was like, I don't know what the hell that is, because in the podcast, Rurikhan was like, well, the way you survive Eschaton Judgment, I think it's called. I'm like, what is that? And like, oh, the room-wide AoE. And the problem I was having is, it turned out it was just my interpretation of the dialogue from the game. I think this is stuff that should definitely be moved to, for more clarity, into the ecological report, because I have full research at this point on Alatreon, yet this specific mechanic and how it works is never mentioned in any way. In fact, all the in-game dialogue heavily points to elemental weapons and breaking the horns. The actual mechanic I was missing is there are mini DPS checks in the fight. One of them is to break the horns, but breaking the horns doesn't actually do what I thought it did, which is why I got super confused, is breaking the horns prevents Alatreon from switching into ice mode. And because I'm using an ice elemental weapon, that means a lot of my damage is now rendered null and void. It doesn't work anymore. That makes sense. However, what didn't make sense to me is that there's another DPS check, which is you have to knock Alatreon over. That's what actually reduces the damage of this giant room-wide AoE. And my damage throughout the day was focused on general DPS. Let's put it that way. General DPS. Like, if I could hit the head at any point, I was going to hit the head. It does more damage. I would work the legs whenever I was not able to hit the head, but my primary focus was trying to hit the head. Mainly because I saw that the DPS values that were coming off the boss, like the actual damage numbers, were way higher on the boss, on the head. But that's not how this fight works. It actually works by elemental build-up on the legs, which cause him to fall over, and when that happens, that results in the damage reduction of the room-wide AoE. I didn't know that, so I wasn't in any way pushing for that to happen, because there was nothing in the encounter that kind of pointed to that being a thing. However, and people will rightly point this out, on our first day of tries, when I got fed up trying to hit the head because I hadn't learned how to do that effectively, I did just whack away at the legs and did knock Alatreon over once. And the NPC, the handler, did say, "You're doing a really good job containing the elemental power." And the information I took from that is like, oh, it doesn't necessarily mean damage on the head and the horns that builds it up. Like, actually just hitting him will also have an effect. But you need to knock off the horns, right? That's what I took away from that, which was the wrong message. The actual message they're trying to get across is that Eschaton is now weakened because you knocked him over. Which I'm sure many people, when this happened, did take that information away from it. It's not what I took away from it, so I never made a push for that. And what that led to was a whole day of me trying desperately to figure a way of surviving this room wide, because it only ever happened once, a long time ago, and I thought, or the road I went down mentally was that if I time it, I went down this road, I even stopwatched it. Legitimately, I got my phone out, I was like, I need to stopwatch when he goes into the AoE to figure it out. It's 5:50 550 into the fight, by the way. Unless that's inconsistent. And then I was like, maybe what I do is I actually break the horns like later in the fight, and that means that he's stuck in that form until, you know, following the AoE, and I can force it to be in the ice mode when it does the AoE, because it can do fire or ice. And then because I've broken the horns with an ice weapon and he's in ice, then this will happen and he won't be able to do the fire one. But then I noticed later on, it's like, well, he only does ice if I don't break the horns, but did that mean I didn't break the horns late enough? And I was going down this road, and then because I was constantly getting murdered by this thing. So the problem was with the progress is I was having to use my resuscitates, or my extra lives, if you want to call them that, for the AoE, because I couldn't survive any of them. So that meant that I had zero leeway throughout the fight whatsoever. If I literally got carted once, which you will do on progress here, the fight was over. I could not possibly win the fight because I needed to survive. I needed to get through these AoEs. So I tried everything. I put on my, because it was fire damage. It was like an AoE fire. I was like, right, what is the max fire resist? So I tried so many pulls where I like maxed out my HP. I got a fireproof cloak. And one of the hardest things that I had to deal with, which I know to those of you who know this fight is hilarious, is what the knockover seemingly does is actually reduce the amount of times the damage ticks, because it's tick damage, and the time between the ticks. It gives you plenty of time to heal, right? But if you haven't toppled him over, that doesn't happen. It ticks very, very quickly, and landing a heal is extremely tight. You can do it. I did it many, many times. You can do it, but I was like zeroed in on sound cues. I had a max potion ready. I would like fireproof cloak. I would fill the fireproof cloak with fire resist gems. So I had like 20 plus fire resist. And then I was like, now. And then the heal lands. And then I saw, it took a few attempts to get this right because the timing on the heal was so tight. I was like checking off, like, does this work? And what I would see is like my health drop to like 1%, and then the max potion heal me to full and then drop all the way back down again. I was like, okay, I can't survive it with like 200 HP, which is the max, I think. 200 HP and fire resist and a fireproof cloak. So it's not that, it's something else. And I was totally in the weeds on trying to figure this out. It's like, maybe if I do this, maybe if I'm closer, maybe it's ranged based, you know, because I remember when I did survive it, I was pretty close to the boss. Maybe it's range based. Maybe I need to be underneath him. Maybe I need to be slightly, there's some positioning angle. I went down all these roads when the case is just knock him over in a certain window. I think you have to do it. I'm not super clear on this. I'm trying to remember because we did discuss a lot of things. I think I need to knock him over by a certain time, and then the horns need to be broken by a certain time. So it's like full of mini DPS checks. So that was my day. And then let's talk about the revelations of the podcast that really stuck to me. Most of the things I had kind of worked out without precision. So I was aware that this does something to this, and the way I described it is I have a lot of the jigsaw pieces. I just don't have the complete picture yet, but I have a lot of the pieces. Like how Enrage works with the claw, how mounting works, I was kind of there, but not quite. And that was great to get clarity on those kind of things. The things I absolutely didn't know. People, Rurikhan, who's hosting the podcast, was shocked this was one of them, but it was one of those ones that I had zero jigsaw pieces for, and it blew my mind because I was like, that is so stupid that it works that way, was that your cloaks, your mantles, which are a huge part of your toolkit, don't start resetting unless you remove them after they've been used. This mechanic blows my mind as to how stupid that is. So what happens is you put your mantle on, you'll get the effect, and then once it's consumed, the mantle stays on, but it greys out, which I've seen many times. It greys out because it's been consumed. What I didn't realize is that it won't start cooling down and actually resetting to use it again unless you then take it back off manually. You like manually remove it either by taking it off or by putting another cloak on. Why is this something that blew my mind? Well, using a fireproof cloak strat on Alatreon and saving that for the Eschaton Judgment meant that my temporal mantle just stayed on my back throughout the entirety of those phases because I wasn't going to put on another cloak until it did the AoE 5 or so, nearly 6 minutes into the fight. which meant I could have got at least one more use out of it per phase, which is a big deal for a fight where you can get clobbered very quickly. That was infuriating when I found that out. I was like, I cannot believe that they've done it this way. Instead of like, it's consumed, so it starts cooling down. No, you've got to manually remove it for the cooldown to begin. I was like, but it was one of those that I did notice, because I realized, once I realized it was like nearly 6 minutes into the fight before it does this AoE, I was like, why is my temporal mantle not back? I knew there was something sussy, but I was also fighting at the time because I was like clicking the lap button on my phone to like keep track of the time and things like that. So I didn't put too much thought into it, but I'd noticed something was funky going on. The other one, you can stay down. I am so sorry to our TDP viewers. I am so sorry, because I have no doubt many of you known about this. I'm happy in a way, because so often in the content creation and live stream world and that, the blind playthrough is a complete sham, and it's very noticeable. Like, I see it a lot. I see it a lot when people are like, we're doing this blind, no help, and they'll just discover a mechanic or do something that they can't help because they're aware of it or they've practiced beforehand, and they'll react in a way to a certain thing that's not natural, but it's correct, but it's something you would figure out after a few pulls or something, or you like be thinking about it and like vocalize that. It happens all the time. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's I think there's a definite, I mean, obviously there's ego in live streaming. You have to have some ego in order to put yourself in front of, hundreds of thousands of people or whatever. But there's a fear that looking bad is going to cost you viewers. And there probably is some truth to that. There probably is some truth to like, oh, I expect really good gameplay. And we're going to get more to this later on. I expect absolutely world-class gameplay from the get-go in a blind playthrough, despite the fact that nobody has that playthrough on their first time through, right? It's really good, and I would recommend this. If you've got a favorite speedrunner, and we're always compared to speedrunners, it's very weird to me of how people are compared to speedrunners who have done the same boss encounter thousands of times, right? They know the ins and outs of it, it's the mechanics of it, the code of it in many cases. And they'll compare your first try to it to a speedrunner. And it's so absurd. And it actually happened to me recently. This weekend was the first time in my entire life I've been able to continuously run a 10,000 meters. It was a monumental moment for me personally. Because I've never been able to run. I'm a big guy. I've always been overweight. And I started my weight loss. I hate the word journey. It sounds it sounds dirty, but whatever. It just sounds so pompous. A couple of years ago, and one of my primary goals was like, I would really love to be able to do like a 10,000 meter run, and I did it for the first time this weekend, and it was awesome. And I'd like tweet it out because a lot of people have been coming along with me for this, and they've known I've wanted to do this. And I was like, I did it. I finally crossed the line in like 59. It was 58:30 is when I did it, and then I had to slow down and take the picture. And so many people were comparing me to like Olympic runners. I was like, what are you doing? No, I'm not a training camp all the time running 4 or 5 times a day. It's very strange. It's very strange. It's like, well, it's not like an Olympic pace. I'm like, why would it be? Like, are you crazy? Like, that's absurd. That's totally, what a preposterous thought process to have. But it's always funny coming back to it of like this idea of like, well, you're not doing like the fully optimal setup and stuff. I'm like, well, no. And things like what I'm about to say, I always think of like, well, it's clear evidence of like how much I go out of my way to avoid spoilers. Sometimes it's unavoidable, especially for Monster Hunter World. I did point this out last night during the podcast, is people tried so many ways to reach out to me. It was insane. Like from Steam messages, Discord messages, Twitter, any form of avenue they could get to me. People were trying desperately to get information to me because they were like, you'll have a better time. It's an interesting thing, and it'll probably be in the summary of this in the finale, is I'm having a really good time struggling. I've loved that stuff. I've been a mythic raider, and I've progged bosses for months, really, really super hard bosses, and it's fine. 600-700 pulls for me is fine, and because I get that. A puzzle, people don't like, the way I always compare it is people hate puzzles if they don't have the experience of solving the puzzle. because that's the reward. If you never solve the puzzle, or if you struggle with the puzzle and you don't finish it without cheating or something, or by like just giving up, then puzzles are just a horrible experience for you. But if you do a puzzle and you struggle and then you solve it, that's the good bit. And I have that with gaming. And a good example of this to point out is my heart rate. My heart rate chills between 65 and 70, even when people think I'm angry and frustrated. Clearly I'm not. Like, physiologically, I'm not. I'm actually having a really good time. I might be like, oh, why did that get me? But I'm not like mad. Because people get worried about that. They're like, he's going to lose his mind. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm actually really having a good time. But the big one was you can stay down on the floor and you're immune to damage. I know that I have complained about unstoppable wombo combos, which can still happen. Like, Ruri was like, that can still happen. But if you do get knocked down into the state where your character is like AFK on the floor, if you just don't get up, you're immune to damage. And you can just wait for the time to get up. And it has been the #1 bugbear of this game for me since day one. And I've complained endlessly about being CC'd while I've lost, not only because regularly it happens, is you will be hit for a huge amount of your HP. Your character is then CC'd, where now I know you can probably just stay down and you're fine. But obviously, the game doesn't tell you this, by the way. This is one of those things the game doesn't tell you. It's you're obviously like, I need to get up and get out of the way so I can sort myself out. But in doing so, you're hit by something else which then kills you. And then your cat will resuscitate you. And before you can control your character again, you can't move. You're physically stuck in place. You will die because the boss doesn't stop attacking you. And you can just stay down and wait. That is going to be extraordinarily hard for me to implement into my gameplay. Because I have been doing 150 hours of get up and spamming and get up and doing things. I tell you, one thing that I noticed throughout this is I believe Rurikhan had his list of things that he wanted to go through, and then he kind of went to the chat of things that he hadn't seen in my stream that people really wanted me to know. A lot of things that we clearly been doing that probably people who drop in, drop out didn't see me do earlier in the stream or whatever, or when they would have done it, and assumed we didn't know it. So there's a lot of that was going on. Like, does he know about fast travel? Yeah, we fast traveled a bunch of times. On occasion, it's like I'm not 100% sure where the boss is going to be, or I haven't got all the camps, so I can't just fast travel to that camp because I don't have it. Right? I don't have that camp. So it's one of those of like, well, not sure where the boss is, and maybe this will shave off 10 seconds, but if you're a seasoned player, you would always fast travel because you know exactly where the boss is going to be. If you don't know that, you don't always fast travel. It's as simple as that. Mounting, we figured out a few days ago now. The switch axe is one that needs deeper look. I am going to continue on as I am, and we'll get to this in a second of how this proceeds from here. There's a lot more combos than the game tells you about. Is what I discovered last night. There's a huge amount of combos that are not listed in the game that are actually really, really good. And there are some that you do but don't work the way you think. One of them is a big mistake of mine, I think. I actually want to check the tutorial today. Is regularly I would put up my charge for the axe because that increases the chance of flinching the enemy. So a very common thing you've probably seen me do is put this buff up, get that charge, it's an orange glow under the weapon icon, which increases your odds of flinching the enemy, and then swapping to sword for more DPS, because in my mind, I'm like, cool, I've got the flinch bonus, and I'm doing mad DPS with the sword, bro. I am like caning this enemy right now. And I found out last night that power charge has no effect in sword mode at all, and is an utter waste of time. God damn it, dude. And I'm sure that probably is worded in a way in the tutorial which makes sense once you know that, such as like creates a power axe, or will enhance the flinch mode of the axe or something like that. My brain didn't pick up on that line or didn't read it properly, but it probably is there. My assumption was this is still the same weapon. It switches, it extends into sword mode or axe mode or whatever, but it's still the same weapon. So if I buff up a part of it, that would still apply because it's still the same weapon. It's not like it's like I've pulled a different weapon out entirely. It's still the same device. It's still the same iron and bolts strapped together. So regularly what I've been doing is like staying in axe mode, doing this huge combo of wild swings and overheads, which then gives you the charge, and then swapping to sword mode, and I'm like, boom, I'm doing mad damage, and I've got bonus flinch, I'm going to wreck this monster, and that is not happening at all. Absolute scam. Total scamboozle, and just a waste of damage since day one. That's been like 100 hours plus of doing that, and that will no longer be happening. I'm actually not even sure when I would bother putting the buff up now, which is a real shame because I always got such satisfaction of getting the buff up and being like, yeah, I've got the buff up. I'm not even sure it's worthwhile at this point to possibly do that. I'm like, I kind of want to increase my chances to flinch, maybe, but I'm just missing out on a ton of sword DPS by doing this. Whatever. So where do we go from here? Got some choices, and I think there's some confusion because now the floodgates are open, and I was able to once again check my social media. A lot of some stuff that Rurikhan suggested that I actually can't. I do know about Fatalis or Fatalis exists. Rurikhan has said they're very, very unlikely on going to be able to do that at all without a substantial amount of farming, because it was designed, and in fact this comes back to Alatreon actually, a really good point, and this is why I love Rurikhan. I've never been able to speak to him before, despite our history of crossing paths like 12 years ago. This is the first time we've been able to speak. A voice of genuine reason in a world where people have faulty memories of things is... Rurikhan made it abundantly clear. It's like, you can probably kill Alatreon, but it will need to be like the perfect pull, because he just went, I just want you to know your gear is terrible, like really, really bad. Your decoration choices are atrocious. You just don't have that selection of them that you need. The gear is kind of okay, but he said, people forget, because it's been so long, people forget that when Alatreon was released, it actually caused massively negative review bombing on Steam because they couldn't kill it. And that was with like augmented gear, which is where your armor goes into the plus, and is significantly more powerful than what I have. And it's like, we did it when this fight came out. It caused people to just review bomb the hell out of the game because it was way too hard. People couldn't do it, and that was with substantially better gear than you have. And in fact, he brought, I think it was Kanta. He said people forget that Kanta, who I'm not aware of, and I'm going to look into. My podcast was only a few hours ago. One of the best players took so long to kill this on the first try. And people just forget because it was years and years ago, or maybe they came in with, you know, watching a guide or something, or just with substantially better items than what you have. And this is what you're doing is like an authentic, actually inauthentic, because you're somewhat undergeared. And it's one of those where, again, you get compared to Spear. It's like, well, it has been done by X person. Well, I'm sure it has, who's already killed the boss thousands of times. The first kill wasn't like that. And that's what people forget. Is like, yeah, now, you know, after mastering every nuance and flinch animation of shoulder movement of the boss and things like that, yeah, for sure. But not now, which is kind of okay. Fatalis, Rurikhan said on the first kills, it took people like 20 plus hours, and that was with like mega gear to defeat that fight. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what's involved. It was like, that is going to require, like, it can be done. You know, somebody has done it who's mastered the fight in lesser gear, but you would really like for a first kill it's probably close to impossible, if not impossible for you to do. He also mentioned Silver Rathalos and Golden something else. I think it was a couple of Rathaloses. But it turns out they need like Master Rank 70 or something like that to achieve, which we're a long way away from. So what does that mean going forward? I want to kill Alatreon. But I think that is going to be our last boss. I think that's where we call it for now and take a break before Wilds comes out. I think we do Alatreon, and I want that kill. I've put a lot of time into it. I'm getting very comfortable with the fight. Not perfect by any means, but we'll see. I want to do some tries today and see if I can consistently topple him. If I can do that, like, without it being luck, you know, depending, because his attacks are RNG, and there are certain attacks that are just way more open to damage him. If I can get that topple reasonably consistently, I've gotten a good strategy of breaking the horns. Like a wall break will do 80% of the damage to the horns, which means they kind of just fall over to either... They either fall over during the part break because you've hit his head a couple of times to the wall bang, or you hit it once or twice after that and they fall down. Pretty good with that. If I can get the topple reasonably consistently and it doesn't come down to luck and animations on the boss, I want that kill. What I'll probably do if I can't do that, if I can't get that consistency... at least 50% of the time. I consider that pretty consistent if I get it 50% of the time. Then we'll probably go and get some decorations. Rurikhan recommended some decoration farm bosses like I had with that fat Jackrass or whatever it was that spewed decorations everywhere, just to get some better gems. Because like your decorations are horrendous. They're so bad. You're having to put like level 1s in level 4 slots just because of the choices you have, which is true. I'll probably do that and see how that goes. But that's where I'm at. I want to kill Alatreon. I might have a look at Fat Alice and just see what the fight looks like. But if it's going to be a case of like, all right, we now need to do another 30 hours of just sort of grinding the Guiding Lands, I'm good for a break there to go into Wilds fresh. I think that's probably the place to go. I'll take a look at it, see what I think. See if we can cope with the mechanics. But This is probably for the final thoughts in this game, but one thing I've definitely noticed, certainly if you go back and do some of the previous monsters, or even mid-master rank enemies, the scales of power that you gain in this game are really strong, to the point where even having 5 or 10% more damage against an enemy significantly changes how the fight works, because they flinch more often, which leads them way more open to massive combos. They fall down easier. You know, all these things, the scale of like who has the advantage swings massively. And you notice it when you're like, oh god, I really struggled against, say, Barioth. And then 2 days ago, I did Tempered Extreme Barioth and just melted it to the floor, because once you have a slight power advantage over the enemy, the fight totally shifts in your favor in a real snowbally way, where they're just CC'd more, they're less aggressive because they're just not doing as much, you have way more opportunities for huge damage output, whereas when it's the other way, and you're doing like a very current fight or under-geared fight, you are on the back foot all the time trying to squeeze in 1 or 2 things, and the boss barely even recognizes you're there, and it changes so dramatically. Which I think does give people who've played a lot a distorted view of the earlier kills that they did. Who knows? But either way, that's where we're at. That's what I want to try. I think what we might do is do a TDP. I'll see how Bex thinks about this. Is have a look through like the comments that have... I haven't looked at the comments on the TDP and see what like some of the juicy ones are, and see if I can respond to them. All right. So we'll see you then. Bye, guys.